Hey everybody, just testing out a new mic and deciding that I'd like to end up covering something that doesn't often come up. Also, hey, guess what? You get to see my face today. Well, is what it is. Join me on a little bit when we end up discussing backgrounds. Yes, those wonderful little tidbits that I've seen a lot of GMs deciding that, hey, can you end up handing me your character's background and all this good? And it's, let me tell you how it normally happens, at least in my experience. And this is kind of sad when I think about it. Here's the thing. I end up giving a background to a character to any GM. And here's what usually ends up happening. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. It doesn't influence the game one bit. At best, and this is best case scenario, and it's kind of sad because there's usually so much content being put in, so much effort, so much thought. It gives you a little bit of the psychology in that character. That's what you want. You want to be able to get inside that headspace. But here's the thing. It wasn't until about a year ago did I start really considering my backgrounds. Why is that? Well, here's an idea for you. Backgrounds are a tool for both the player and the GM, storyteller, flame tender, whatever you want to call them. Let's start with the very basics. When you're writing a background, what you're really doing is you are, as a player, telling your storyteller what kind of game, what kind of avenue you're looking to expect. If I'm playing, say, a thief who's been getting by on the streets, and maybe I've built up a Robin Hood persona. Yeah, we might go together and end up raiding a few dungeons, kill some kobolds, steal their armor, try and sell it to the blacksmith, which case he promptly should backhand us for trying to toss him rags. But no, they're worth a copper, it says in the book, no, these things are tarnished, horrible, and, basically worn by subhuman vermin trying to poke at you with sharp sticks. No, I don't want that. But still, when you end up building that kind of character, the GM, in my mind, should look at this and go, oh, okay, he's thinking about a thief. He's stolen some bit given to the poor. Well, do that, reflect that, let that come back. Bring that back to him. Because if you're going to end up playing a thief, particularly one that might have some notoriety, maybe walking into the tavern isn't the greatest idea, especially with off-duty guards typically wanting to end up forgetting the fact that, the people aren't liking them, probably throwing rotten vegetables their way while they're guarding said royalty walking down the streets and all that kind of shit. They just want to get on with their day. But then they see this notorious thief with a bounty on their head. Yeah, they might want to end up going to get some. That's what you signed on for when you wrote that background. That's what you tried to hint to the GM that would come back. The other bit is that you're offering the storyteller plot hooks. The plot hook that's often said is, I need you to go into this, whatever your dungeon of preference is, cave, old crypt, etc., to get or do Y, and I will give you Z. Taking a page out of Anders' book, it is, I need you to get the princess back from a group of goblins, and I'll give you 60 gold pieces. Most of us don't care. It's not a compelling story hook. It's a nice bit for a one shot if you're like, look, I just need a very generic reason that you guys are going down there and we'll call it a day, right? So those 50 gold pieces really don't matter at the end of the one shot because what are you going to spend them on? That's a resource you gained for further down the line. And when there's no further down the line, it's kind of hard to give a shit. Even if you're trying to play in character, it's a little bit of a hurdle to get over. Some people can do it, which is great, but you have the chance to end up really giving the GM some plot hooks, some ways that he can involve your character. You know, what kind of puzzle piece can he end up doing? Not even puzzle piece. Think of it more like a Goldberg machine. You know, just this odd device here, this odd device here, and somehow, you know, by the time it ends up, you drop a marble in this one slot, and by the end, somehow you end up having a fully prepared breakfast. Thanks, Doc. The other bit is that the GM can look at it and go, well, what kind of character is he bringing along here, right? If your character is an orphan, right? A lot of people end up taking that one. Oh, yeah, you know, he's orphan raised on the streets, that kind of thing. Or she, you know, we're not picky. Poverty doesn't care about gender. Well, if we're thinking about this for a minute, what can we do with it? Other kids at the orphanage, bring back that little bit of history. Say, guess what? Your past can come back to haunt you. You wanted to write about this? Well, let's bring that to the forefront. Another thing to end up considering is don't make your background the most interesting time of your character's life. Because, well, as a friend once told me, why aren't we telling that story rather than this one if that's the case? Why not, indeed? Yeah, well, a lot of people end up making the mistake of making a background something that you can just, hey, let's go at it. Let's fill in this novel that's 800 pages, hand to my GM and say, this is a detailed background. It's detailed something. Your background isn't there to tell the past glories, right? You don't need to go into too much detail on that. What you should be shooting for is that here's maybe 3 or 4 paragraphs for your GM. We'll get into the details on that later. That sell them on the concept. It's like the GM, you want the GM to be your biggest fan. You really do. So you should be able to explain in relatively simple terms why it is that you want to end up playing this and why it is that the GM would want this kind of character in their game. And hopefully it's more enticing than our group needs a healer. I really hope it's more enticing than that. Because I think you guys can do better. I think anyone can do better when they put their mind to it. And it doesn't really matter where you're starting from. You know, everybody ends up learning at a different pace. I'm usually not too picky about it, so long as people are willing to learn. What makes me an authority on this? I'm an authority because of 1,001 terrible decisions and mistakes. And you learn from them. You know, rather than advice that was just given out. Not to get too far off track, but I'll give you a simple example. I ended up writing up a wizard back in 3.0 Dungeons and Dragons. And this wizard was supposed to be a conjurer. Had this long, intricate background. I probably worked on it for like 3 weeks. And then I remembered getting frustrated with my GM because after we were done, it boiled down to you get a scroll of fireball and, you know, here's an amulet to increase your intelligence and all that. By the end, it was like, why did I even put this much effort into a background and it not being used? And it's also unfair to some GMs who actually do end up going out and reading the background and going, hey, that might be an interesting idea. I want to see that in play. That could be fun. Ooh, try and imagine where this character could go with these NPCs in this situation. Oh, yeah, we can start rocking and rolling, get things going. Well, The other thing is when you start worrying about these backgrounds, you can make them detailed for yourself. That's great. More interesting is the psychology behind the character, though. You know, your backgrounds might formulate why you do something in a specific way, but I don't need a character background to explain why they might be sarcastic in nature or why they might be humble or insightful, wise, maybe brash. You don't need to describe all these, but these are far more important than the trying to explain why it is that your character came out of the foothills to the east, ended up deciding to travel towards the town. There's 101 reasons why this character would travel, particularly in a more Dungeons and Dragons type game. If you're a known adventurer, you know, even if it's just level 2, if you're somebody who strives for adventure, yeah, you go where the action is. All the GM needs to do is start putting out a few rumors, and it's like, okay, well, I'm definitely following that because who knows, I might be able to end up putting some bread on the table tonight. Don't be afraid to bring the details that can matter, that can be a plot hook. This could be family, obvious one. Hey, a family member is actually kidnapped when all this stuff happens, or a vengeance plot line. Yeah, those are always fun. Another thing is that they might be a resource. Maybe it is that your family has an old legend, something that they kept in, an old story that they used to tell. And because of that old story, it's actually a clue to the magic MacGuffin that you're currently seeking out. Maybe the place you have has some history, you know, such as a old dungeon, an old palace dungeon, and you might see the scribblings of what seemed to have been a madman when you start researching who this was. As you continue to delve in and you start realizing what kind of person this is, you realize, holy shit, this was my great grandfather. That these are old forgotten ramblings, and realizing on how you are descended from what used to be a minor evil of, well, small bit of notoriety, your family's dark secret they never told you. You can do a whole bunch of stuff with just the relations and who the player was. Like I said, all those little details, the plot hooks, there are ways to end up building up. And it's the responsibility of a player to end up telling the GM, either out of character or via the in character story, what it is that you're looking for, what is it that you're wanting to play out, what kind of game you're actually looking for with this character. And then it's the GM's chance to look at that background, take that knowledge, and weave the stories, the tales that you're going to tell for years to come. The things that make that character great are not the things found in the background, the things that have yet to come.